Welcome. Hello. We're here for our office hours as part of our digital transformation residency. I think by now everyone's pretty familiar with what our digital transformation residency is. We are spending this year focused on talking about just really the dynamic and the impact that all of the digital environment is going to bring to pooling and how it is going to transform pooling and work that we all do as pools. So that's our residency this year. Our resident is Scott Klososky. Scott's here with us today. Scott is leading us through the charge to understand the totality of all the opportunities that technology will offer to us as pools, but also he's really great at reminding us that there's a human element as well and keeping us really grounded in that human element that we know is so important to all of us in our member relationships. So today, the focus for today is why you need a digital strategy roadmap. Thank you, Scott. So we talk about this digital strategy roadmap. That's a lot of syllables. It really, in my mind, is the strategic vision for how your pool performs when it uses its technology most effectively. So Scott can tell me if he's got a different way to describe that or if I'm not quite correct, but in my head, the way I think about it is almost like your mission statement or your vision statement for what your pool is going to be when it uses technology most effectively, most thoroughly in your organization. That's the idea of your digital strategy. Your digital strategy roadmap is sort of what's going to help you get there. So we really talk about road mapping as this tool that you can use in your pool to make sure that everybody is using the tech tools that you have and that you have all the right tech tools to be able to serve the core mission of your membership. And I think that's a really important element. I'm sure we'll talk more about it as Scott takes us through some key questions for today. But we know that ultimately the reason for a digital strategy is for you to serve your members. There is no pool that is implementing technology just for the sake of implementing technology. You're doing that technology initiative, you're training your people in order to be able to meet that end goal of serving your members better. Now, I know that Scott is going to help us understand two things that a strategy and roadmap is not. It is not the same as your pool's strategic plan, and it is not the same as just a list of upgrades that you may need in your pool. So as we talk through these questions today, we'll be talking about, sort of how that digital roadmap comes to play, and then also how it's different than those other things that you might have in your pool. So our goal today overall is that Scott is going to help us understand this mental model of digital strategy road mapping. We're going to explore how it's different than strategic planning. We're going to talk about why it's so important. And ultimately our goal is we want you to be able to start thinking about how your pool's technology efforts can fit into this strategig outlook, regardless of whether you call it a roadmap or something else. We want you to have the mental model that allows you to do that strategic visioning work specific toward your digital initiatives. So Scott, I think that's all I have as far as introduction, if you want to take it away.
All right, that was a good introduction. I liked it. For all of you, there are things in technology that I am very passionate about. This is one of them. I spend so much time trying to help organizations and help leaders understand how to do digital transformation. And at the end of the day, for an organization to transform, you got to have a good plan. And more than just a plan, you got to have a good strategy. And there's a difference between, as Ann said, an upgrade plan and a strategy. Like, these are different things. And then we'll talk about that a little bit more. So today's session, we really want to talk about kind of the philosophy of digital strategy road mapping. We are not going to teach you how to do strategy road mapping today. That's a longer conversation. We're going to talk about elements of this and why it is so important to be good at this. And specifically, we're going to answer three questions today. One question is, hey, why does your pool need a digital strategy roadmap? Why do you need the whole roadmap and a strategy and not just an upgrade list, right? Why do you need this? Then we're going to talk about how does the digital strategy relate to just the strategy for the pool in general? As Ann alluded to, I do not believe that these need to be mixed. There are a lot of quotes that I see people do online that say things like, oh, there is no digital strategy. Everything's a digital strategy now. or there shouldn't be a separate plan. No, there actually really should be a separate plan. And we'll unpack that a little bit. And then the third question we want to go over is, why do some leaders struggle with this? So this is not a leadership task that is being done with excellence today. It's just not. Rarely in the course of my travels do I walk into an organization and say, show me your digital strategy roadmap. And they produce a set of documentation that's updated, that's really well thought out, that's actually a strategy that everybody understands, that's on track. I mean, rarely do I ever see this. And so there's some struggle out there, and there's some good reasons why leaders struggle. We should talk about that. And so those are the three questions we're going to answer today. So there you go. There's your agenda. All right. I say we jump in. Let's start dealing with the first one right off the bat. And I'm going to do my first pointing at a bullet point. There you go. So let's answer this question. Why does a pool need a digital strategy roadmap? I'm going to give you 5 reasons why we think this is true. And I'm just going to ask Ann to jump in anytime she wants, as always, right? And add color. So the first thing is just the increasing pace of change. So when you are basing a strategy, or you are basing your pool's activities, your pool's progress on tools like technology, and that underlying tool is constantly changing and changing quickly, this would lead you to understand, or lead you to believe, that it is wise to have a strategy then of, okay, how are we using all of this technology? How's it going to change? What's it going to do in the future? How might that open up new opportunities for us in the pool? How might we be able to do better things with our members when some of this newer technology comes along? But the fast pace of change means that we have to do a good job with planning. And if we're going to do a good job with planning, that means having a really good roadmap that's well thought out. All right, let me give you a second reason that I think a pool really needs a good strategy roadmap. Member expectations are growing. Now, this is often called the Amazon effect, but what it really means is, in our daily lives, we're all using different applications, new technologies, right? It could be new devices, new websites, right? We're using new things all the time. Every time we use something that has a high amount of convenience, or a high amount of automation, right? Or a high amount of customer service, then we're asking ourselves, well, if you're a member, why can't the pool do this? And so as those member expectations grow, you got to be careful of the gap between what your members are using out in the world and what you're supplying as a pool. Because if there's a gap, then you're not earning the digital halo. And you've heard us use that term before about how important it is that the pool is seen by their members as having a digital halo. Hey, you're great at being a pool. We love your human connection that you do. And then you also have a digital halo. Like, that is the prime place you want to be as a pool when it comes to how members think about you. Wonderful people, they provide a great service for us, and they have a digital halo, okay? But the problem right now is those expectations are growing. We need a good strategy to make sure we're meeting them. All right, data, decision-making, insight. Right? Data activation. You hear us use that term a lot, right? Data activation. Well, this is becoming an increasingly important thing that a pool can do, is use data well, gather the data, store it well, analyze it well, visualize it well, create predictive analytics, like activate the data to be able to be helpful to the members, but also helpful to you to make wonderful decisions, right? There is a whole plethora of decisions that we still make by instinct and experience, and that decisions we're not making based on the data. This is such an important area of growth for a pool. It is complicated, okay? It's complicated. And why do we need a strategy? Because this is not a simple thing. I was telling Ann earlier, we were talking, and I don't mean to demean a regular strategy, right? The pool strategy, but the regular pool strategy might say things like, we need to do a better job with risk control. And in order to do a better job with risk control, we might need to do some more education. right? But the variables or the methods to do a better job of risk control, they're pretty easy to understand. The methods to try to do data activation, not easy at all. It's complicated. All right. So anyway, it's another reason why you want to be really good at doing your strategy roadmap, right? It's just to be able to exploit data, to activate data in a better way. All right, the growing price pressures, and I'm going to talk about this in two different areas. The price of technology, because technology is expensive and it isn't really getting any less expensive. It's more expensive. It's a big investment. Now, that's one area. But there's also pricing pressure on every company to be more efficient and to get our costs down. Our customers, our members, they all expect that. You know, do more with less. Hey, that's what technology is supposed to be able to do for you. Automate things and drive costs down. So we want to get costs down. We got pricing pressure from technology going up. We got to do a great job of planning. You know, again, why you want a roadmap of what are we going to invest in with technology? What do we want the returns to be? What are our expectations? Right, we got to be good at that. All right, and the last thing, go ahead.
Pricing pressure is one that I want to jump in on because I think the flavor of the conversation for public entity pools is a little different. You know, that conversation about efficiency and price pressure from the consumer standpoint, if you will, and what the gain might be if the pool as an organization were to gain some efficiency. That's a pretty minor consideration. You know, no pool, even if you could implement some sort of strategic technology that would save your pool 20% of its operational expenses, what that translates into in terms of a contribution savings at the member level is negligible, right? So we aren't usually looking at those pricing pressures as, hey, if we had an efficiency, we certainly wouldn't be generating more profit. That's not what we do. And our members wouldn't really be paying significantly less contribution. I think the way that the pricing pressure comes into play for pools is that we're talking to our governing bodies who are public sector managers, leaders, elected officials who aren't necessarily accustomed to seeing a $4 million price tag behind a claim system or more, who aren't used to seeing the kinds of technology investments that we have to make year after year after year. And so it's more about sort of putting that pricing pressure and the pricing construction understanding so that when we're talking to our governing bodies and they're seeing that expenditure, they understand that we're doing the best we can for the greatest efficiency at the lowest possible price.
Yeah, I think that, you know, great point. And, you know, I agree with you that I think, you know, just lowering the pool's cost is a minor piece, right? Compared to the overall cost and investment in technology. You know, one of the things I love about doing a really professional job of you know, strategy and digital road mapping is being very clear about the ROI. So if we are going to spend that $4 million, what exactly are we going to get out of this and when are we going to get it? You know, again, that's the difference between just doing an upgrade and saying, well, we know we got to replace our system, so let's spend, you know, a lot of money and replace our system. There's a big difference between saying we know we have to do it, let's just go spend it, or saying we're going to spend it and here are all the things that we believe we're going to get out of it and holding ourselves accountable to get those things. Right? That's a difference between, yeah, we're just going to do an upgrade or modernize versus, no, we have a whole strategy for how we're going to leverage that modernization. All right, the last point I'll make just about, you know, why does a pool need to do this and do this well is just the alignment of the governing body, you know, like a board, leadership and the staff. Technology today not only does it have a huge impact on our success, it also is something we all share. So, I mean, the staff, they have to touch that technology all day long. So when we improve something, when we modernize, it impacts their jobs. I mean, it impacts what they do all day. And so, you know, they have a vested interest in whatever our strategy is going forward with technology. Leadership, of course, is invested in it. They've got to okay the money. They've got to, you know, make sure the ROI comes out of it, and they want the success from technology. You know, a board or the governing body, they want to have a real clear understanding of just strategically, how are we making investments in technology and what are we hoping to get? without having the right kind of strategy roadmap and documentation, it's almost impossible to bring everybody together to understand the vision, right? Just digital strategy is too complicated this day for a bunch of verbal conversations. So anyway, these are my top 5 reasons. And do you agree with these reasons? Any other, anything else you'd say about these?
You're out of space on this slide, so I don't think we can come up with any more reasons. I wonder, Scott, if you might want to just address, though, I know you feel passionately that a digital strategy roadmap is not the same as a list of upgrades. You want to maybe tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I've thrown that out. Let me step back. In what I do, every year I get to see probably at least 20 to 30 organizations that I've never met before who ask me to review their digital strategy. They're all different sizes and different industries. And when I go look at those, I will tell you that the vast majority of the time, what they show me is a Gantt chart or a spreadsheet that has a list of things that they're going to upgrade. And what I'm talking about is, hey, we're rolling to a new version of this. We're going to buy laptops for this group. We're going to put some new AV in our boardroom, right? This is the kind of stuff they list. And then they say to me, well, here you go. This is our strategy. And I look at it and I go, okay, well, this is a piece of a strategy, which is here's what you're doing to modernize. And we're always going to be modernizing. What I want to understand is, all right, well, how are you using technology to support your operating plan? How are you integrating technology with your people and making sure that that's a healthy connection? What are your expectations for what your technology is going to do for members? And how sure are you that you're meeting exactly what your members want? All of these questions I'm asking now are more strategic questions about what are we doing with technology. But the reason I'm so passionate about this is when for a living you review and help people with their digital strategy and you see this big gap of no, all you're doing is looking at a bunch of upgrades, then it becomes a point that you want to make to leaders. And so I would just ask you, those of you who are leaders who look at any kind of plan that you call a digital plan or a digital strategy at your pool, when you look at it, ask yourself, is this a list of upgrades, or does this deal with the more strategic parts of, well, what are we trying to accomplish? What are we doing here that is thought leading? What are we doing here that is going to help us win that, the digital halo? What are we doing here that's really going to move the needle in our member relationship? What are we doing here that's going to help us operate better because we're automating, and what percentage of improvement are we going to get? Right? These are the things I want to see in a roadmap. Is not just what are we doing, but why are we doing it? Right? Why are we doing it? And have we covered everything that we should? Because just an example, you can modernize all the technology you want, but if your team members are not trained on how to use it, it's going to be a huge fail. And we do too much of that. We spend money upgrading technology and we don't teach our team members, or we don't educate them. We don't give them incentives to be able to use the technology in a better way, because we don't see that as part of a strategy, and it's a key part of a strategy. So there you go. That's a longer story, Ann, about why I'm so passionate about this.
So the good news, and what I heard you just say, well, there's lots of good news, but part of it is if your pool just has that list of upgrades, right, there's nothing wrong with that, but you can certainly look at that list of upgrades and ask what you're trying to accomplish. And I think, Scott, that framing was really useful. Not just what are you going to do, but what are you going to try to accomplish with all of those upgrades and all of those implementations. And hopefully, to give you the segue to the next segment, what you hope to accomplish is also supportive of your pool's overall strategy or business plan.
That is a fact. Again, let me go back to what I mentioned to you before about, I saw this quote from a well-known person online one day that said, there is no business plan anymore. There's just there's a digital strategy plan, and that is the business plan. And that's of course not true. And then I had the debate a couple of times with leaders who have said to me, well, why do we need to do this as a separate thing? We just do one set of planning, right? I mean, we have our strategic plan, and then the digital is just baked into it. I want to give you a few reasons why I do not agree with that model, about why I think there needs to be separate plans. There's the strategic plan for the pool. What are we trying to accomplish from our mission, with members, from a financial standpoint and operational standpoint? There's that plan. And then there needs to be a separate plan of how does digital support that? And that's my reason number one, right? Is a digital strategy, it empowers the strategic plan. So once I understand what do you want to accomplish as an organization, okay, well then the digital plan needs to match up with that, right? It matches up with that as it needs to empower it. And I'm going to give you an example. There can sometimes be a mismatch if I look at what a pool is investing in versus what they said their strategic plan is. So if we say that in the strategic plan, one of the things that the pool says is we want to build much better relationships with our members. We want to communicate better with them. We want to be able to enhance our communications with them. We want to enhance our ability to do education with them, right? So let's just say that's part of your strategic plan. But then when we look at what you're spending your money on digital, it's all claims processing, right? Which is not bad, by the way. But I mean, that's it. Like the bulk of all your money for the year is going in claims processing. Well, that's a total mismatch with what you just said your strategic plan was. So the digital plan has to be tuned. It has to be aligned. It has to be symbiotic with that strategic plan. Okay. So that's the first thing as far as how they relate. The second thing is you will see, and I'm sure you've seen before, that the digital strategy will open up opportunities to put new things into your strategic plan that you've never had before. So sometimes technology, it gives you a capability that you just did not have. And then you go, okay, well, with this capability, I can now provide a new service to my members that I couldn't provide before, or I can provide an ability for our members to self-serve now. They can go do this transaction or this activity completely on their own without having to talk to our people. And we've never been able to do that before, right? So a lot of times what we think or what we notice is that a good digital strategy, when you look at it, you say, okay, it can now change. It can add things to my overall strategic plan. So that's kind of the second reason, right? That I think these are related, but can be separate. The third is that digital strategy is expensive. I mean, it's just expensive. If you're a small pool, medium or large, it doesn't matter. It's all relative to you. But there's one thing that would be true for every size, and that is technology is expensive for you. Okay. It's expensive if you buy it and put it in-house. It's expensive if you have to get a cloud provider. It's expensive. And so in order to make sure that you are earning a digital halo and improving your technology every year, and you need to think that way, of course, you can't do it in spurts where you spend a whole bunch of money, you improve, and then you take a vacation for 5 years, right? So every year you have to be modernizing a little bit. That's the right way to invest. But in order to do that, you've got to account for that in your strategic plan. So when you do your budget and you're looking at your financial model in your strategic plan, you have to have a very well organized investment program for technology. And if you don't do that, what you'll find is you will be doing technologies in fits, in starts, sometimes when things break, or when something gets so old, you have to replace it. You won't have a good ongoing mature model for how you're modernizing your technology.
Scott, when we were getting ready for today's call, you used that same sort of example in the terminology of feast or famine, that sometimes you see that companies, organizations, pools or otherwise, right? They make a big investment and then they let it slide. And then they make a big investment and then they let it slide. And that reminds me of the term that you use, that is technology debt. So I think this would be maybe a good opportunity to talk about what technology debt is and how you see it come into play.
Sure. If you're not familiar with this term, technology debt means that you got behind on your investments in technology. And that got behind means either you got behind competitors, or in a pool's case, much more often, you got behind where you could be or should be in order for your members to feel like you are doing what is normal out in the market, okay, or what you need to do to have a digital halo. And so technology debt is a fairly easy thing for me to go see, like to observe it. because I can go in and study what a pool is doing with technology, and there'll be pockets where you're quite behind. Like you're just quite behind, where you could be. You're doing a bunch by hand in an area or manually that you could have automated, is a good example where we see technology debt. Or not even automation, sometimes it's just functionality. You have human beings doing functionality by hand that there are systems out there that would do it for you. So technology debt it can be a dangerous thing, especially when you're a leader, because you don't see it sometimes. Sometimes you're like, well, everything's working, we're operating, right? I mean, we're hitting our goals around here. Like, well, you're operating, but you're not operating very efficiently. And it's going to come home to roost. And that's when the technology debt becomes a problem, is when you wake up and realize, hey, we're really behind in this area, and now you have to catch up. And now we have a bit that feast or famine thing where now you have to allocate a whole bunch of money to catch up, and you don't love that. But if you would have been investing a little bit all along the way, you wouldn't be in this situation. And that's the problem with getting with acquiring technology debt.
So I'm going to put that in pooling terminology. Technology debt is the equivalent of a pricing error. Like sooner or later, you're going to have to make it up and then some. And the further behind you are in that pricing error, the bigger the hit when you have to make it up.
Yeah, good analogy. I like that. It's very true. All right, let's look at the last area. So the last area that I think we just need to kick around is why. Why is this a problem? And why do some leaders struggle with doing the work of digital strategy road mapping? Again, as I go in and look at a lot of different strategies, I'm working with lots of different kinds of leaders. And I have to tell you, if I had to pick a number, I would say 90% of them do not know how to do this well. That's just my observation from what I've seen, is 90%. Now, that can be skewed because we're being called in when people know that there's a problem. So I'm being honest about that. A lot of times maybe we wouldn't be there unless there was a problem, but 90% of leaders just don't really have a great idea how to do digital strategy road mapping. And there's some good reasons for this, right? They came by it honestly. So the first thing is, this is not a well-known process, by the way. I think about my career, I have run across all kinds of books and all kinds of models about how to do strategic planning. If it's just business strategic planning, okay? Lots of books about that, lots of models that have been, time tested. There are not a bunch of books out on the market right now teaching you, oh, here's how you do digital strategy road mapping. It is still a bit of a dark art, right? There just aren't really good set models that people have been using for years and years that they've written about or that they're teaching everybody else to do. So that's the first problem, is just a lack of kind of well-known models that you can just go use or copy. All right, second reason I just see that folks aren't good at it, it's just the sheer complexity of technology. Technology is complex on its own to build it and to make it all work and to flow data and get all the functionality you want and automate things. It's already complicated with that. But then it's touching so much of your operation, especially as you automate more and more things with the technology. Every process inside of a pool today is touched by technology. Every process. If you're hiring people, there's technology involved, right? Obviously, you're doing enrollment or claims or anything else, there's a lot of technology involved, right? If you think about that, part of what is a struggle of building a strategy is because of all of this complexity. Again, I will say to you, and I'm not trying to besmirch how hard it is to do a good business strategy, right? Just strategic planning, but there are less variables. There's just less variables when you do strategic planning. You're going to pick out 4 or 5 areas you want to work on to improve this year, with the pool. And the amount of options of how you're going to improve is really fairly small. It's really just putting a stake in the ground of what are we going to do for our overall strategic planning. It's not at all like that with technology. With technology, every time we want to improve something, it can be a mind-numbing set of decisions and choices that we have to make. I'm reading a book right now. The name of the book is Frontal Fatigue. And it's an excellent book about how our modern life and technology is exhausting our prefrontal cortex. And in the book, which I think, a lot of you might enjoy the read, he talks specifically at times about the complexity of modern life and the complexity of technology and how exhausting it can be, right, to our prefrontal cortex. And it's one of the reasons they believe we're having more mental health issues. In this modern world where we have more than we've ever had of convenience and, a good life, we have more mental health issues. Anyway, my point is the complexity, right? A number of times in the book, he mentions that in our modern life, there's so many decisions to make, so many interrelations between everything, that it is straining our brain to keep up all day long. And I think he's right. And I think it's part of the reason why leaders struggle a little bit with defining and doing a digital strategy. All right, the last reason I think it's tough for leaders is this strategy is different than a strategic thinking for an organization, in that when you do a strategy for a pool, typically it's done year by year. So it's like, what's the strategy for the next year? And you set what the strategy is, and then it doesn't change. You just seek to reach it, okay? Digital strategy is not like that. Digital strategy, you can't do it year by year as easily. In fact, we always tell everyone, you've got to be reviewing your digital strategy every quarter. And it's got to be changing and evolving every quarter. So it's an ongoing process. It's not a year by year process if you're going to do it well. And why? Because you're getting new tools, new models, new techniques, new frameworks all the time. All the time. As you're always having to look, all right, do we have to change our strategy a little bit based on this new thing that happened? I'll give you an example of this. When the war between Russia and Ukraine started, the US government came out with an alert that said, shields up, right? And they made a big deal about it, shields up. Now, the problem with that is, I understand the Star Trek reference of shields up. However, they didn't define what shields up really meant. So today, there's people like me trying to define, well, what's shields up level 1, 2, and 3? And what should a pool do? So from a pool standpoint, when somebody tells you get your shields up, you got to ask two questions, like, what does that mean? Like, what do I actually change to have my shields up? Second question is, okay, well, what else could cause me to want to go shields up besides a war in Ukraine? Well, I'd never given any thought to a shields up concept around cybersecurity till 2 months ago. So if I'm only looking at my digital strategy a year out and it's another year before I ask myself, what is shields up going to be and how do I change my cyber strategy? Okay, well, then I'm at risk for another 8 months before I start figuring this out. Things change in technology really fast. So it has to be an ongoing plan, and that is not something that leaders are that used to. They're used to doing strategy planning and having it be solid for at least a year. All right, Ann, you have any thoughts on this? Ann, do you, when I said frontal fatigue and your prefrontal cortex is getting exhausted, Ann, did you say, I got to get that book? Or did you say, no, I have a very strong prefrontal cortex?
Yes, I think is the answer to that question. So the funny thing is that as you were referencing that book, I think it's a great reference. I think it's a great kind of aspect of this conversation, because just as you were mentioning that, Scott, I found myself thinking, we even the timing of the digital transformation residency, we're asking leaders to bite off a really a big set of work, right? And a big set of thinking at a time when they're already pretty tired. And so I was kind of chuckling to myself thinking, oh yeah, that was a great idea coming right off COVID, where you had to deal with an altogether new environment, with issues you had never dealt with before, with things that were changing rapidly. Hey, we're going to reopen the office only to find out that we have to close again 2 days later. Like, we're asking you to bite off COVID again, only on something even bigger and broader and more meaningful to your pool operations. It's exhausting, right? You can appreciate that. And I think, Scott, to the question of why doesn't this get done? Why do folks struggle with this work? It's just really hard to step into, knowing how big and how unknown and how undone it's going to feel for a very long time, right? You're never going to finish this. That's another hard piece, is feeling like, we've got a whole bunch of executives who are maybe in that 5-year window, and Their mindset is, I want to wrap projects before I leave. And this is a project you cannot wrap. And if you're a newer CEO, you might be looking to say, you know, I want to be able to show and demonstrate something within the first 5 years. I mean, you'll be able to demonstrate incremental steps, but again, you're not going to be done with this. So I think it's just a very big, exhausting ask.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And that's why, you know, why do leaders struggle with this? There's good reasons. I guess I want to have some empathy. I don't want people to think that at least what I'm saying is, hey, leaders, you're doing a bad job. It's not that at all. This is a tough job. It needs to be done well, but it's a tough job. Maybe the book will help you.
And maybe let go of the idea that you have to, you know, finish it, right? You just have to start. Your leadership charge is to start it, not to finish it.
Right.